Hello, welcome to my show. It's me, the lumber snack, and this is my faith. But more importantly, today we're having a discourse about Jews. Now, this is being recorded the day after the tragic death of Rob Reiner and his wife, who were Jewish, which is, not something that's all that important, but like Rob Reiner was kind of the director on a lot of cool films, and he was a funny actor, and like it's kind of just a tragic way that they went, as well as the Bondi Beach massacre that happened with two people who just started spraying fire on a group at a Hanukkah party or fest in Australia. And then a dude named, I think his name's like Ahmad or something, Muslim dude, came down and just like disarmed one of the shooters, taking 2 bullets with him. And there is a certain level of Jewish hate that's happening in the world. Now, a big reason that there's so much Jewish hate going on is because of the genocidal actions of Israel, who are about as Semitic as I am Irish. And, going back to that Bondi massacre, which was a tragic thing that happened, I personally was going to just say that it was a misguided person until immediately after freaking Bibi Milikowski, the Israel dude who sucks fat hairy wieners. He just like immediately got on to a press conference and said, I warned you guys, if you advocate for a free Palestinian state, something like this is gonna happen. I know who it was. It was definitely Iran, who he's constantly, blamed for everything. Iran's such a problem. Iran's definitely the issue. They're becoming more and more religiously open and tolerant every single day, and I think Israel's absolute wickedness is to blame. And if you're a Zionist watching this and you hear me just like trash talking you guys deserve it. You guys are kind of just crappy. I really just don't respect you guys like Zionists, and that's not even a Jew thing. That's like there's Christian Zionists now, which are something that makes sense apparently. Like, oh, God promised this group of Israel the promised land 3,000 years ago. No. Didn't happen. Israel is just Jacob and then his kids. And so Israel then became a kingdom in the land of Palestina. So you tell me who's owned by who. But regardless, I figured a big way to do this and fix certain issues would be to run a little math scenario about genetics and family lineage. Now, I'm not going to at all claim to be of any Jewish descent. Absolutely. I will say I can flash up a picture of my biblical doppelganger real quick, which is, of course, Esau, twin of Israel, who's definitely... I'm so sick and tired of the wickedness going on in Israel. And like King David was sick and tired of the wickedness of his people in Israel. Like that was like a big part of his whole thing, was like he got moved into that area and he's like, wow, like a bunch of these people freaking suck. They're wicked. They don't believe in you, God. They don't worship you or anything. And that's David speaking, because he was a believer. He could justify his oldest son raping his daughter and not do anything. Luckily, Absalom can't. But anyhow, I was just gonna see, how rare is it to be a Jew? How from the point, and I did a little baseline research. So the longest traced family lineage in China, I believe, is the Kong family, descending from Confucius. So similar kind of situation going on that, the Old Testament and Abrahamic lineage was dealing with. They tracked this one family 80 generations all the way back to, I think, 1500 or 500 BC, or 15, some long time ago. But from that one person, there are 2 million descendants. And I know for a fact Jacob was around before Confucius. So something to recognize is that Jacob, Israel, lived in about 2500 BC. He had 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. Of those 12 sons, he had Reuben, who had 4 kids, Simeon, who had 5, Levi, who had 4, Judah, who had 4, Dan, who only had 1, as far as we know, Naphtali, who had 4, Gad, who had 7, Asher, who had 5, Issachar, who had 4, Zebulon, who had 3, Joseph, who had 2, and Benjamin, who had 10. Okay, so right out the gate, we're dealing about 2500 BC. Let's be real, 2500 BC. Starting out with 12 sons, and from those 12 children, we have 4, 9, 13, 17, 18, 22, 29, 34, 38, 41, 43, 53. We have 53 kids. And we can see that as an average, we're repping an average of 4 kids per person, per generation. Now, this is the point where the Bible pretty much more or less stops tracking this specific thing. This specific thing and this specific thing. How many grandchildren. It's assumed that they have multiple. The children of Abraham were supposed to build up great nations, and then they were supposed to integrate within these nations, which was the point, which is why a Jewish super state or whatever they want doesn't exist, doesn't make sense. Because in America, our first founding principle was a separation of church and state. So anyone who lives in America and actually, values and prioritizes those founding values of liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, anyone who actually follows those American founding values should be instantly against the Jewish state of Israel. Sorry. You're not as cool as the Mormons in Utah with their Mormon superstate. You don't have people who are Norse trying to establish Nordic ethno-states. No, they have their own regions. That makes sense. There's absolutely no reason these people should be in Palestine. Flat out. Oh gosh, I'm so over it. Anyhow, we have an average of 4 kids. So 2,500 years old. Now we go down to about 500 years down the road. No, wait, this is 1500. My bad. I think Confucius was 500 BC. I'm pretty tired. I don't care. Alright, now we have King David. Now, the reason King David's important is that he's a direct descendant of Israel. Whether he's a direct descendant of Esau as well, I don't know. They were both described as being red and ruddy. And quite frankly, the Jewish ethnosphere of, being descended from Abraham is just a litany of inbreeding. Like, just centuries and centuries and centuries of inbreeding, which is, it happens. I'm not saying anything. These people are very proud of their race, which is cool. It's important to be proud of your heritage, But anyhow, King David, this is 500 years down the road. We're seeing an average person lives what? Well, back in this time, they were repping like 100 years. So let's just say 100 years. So each of these kids likely had an average of 4 kids, or like between all of them. And so it then becomes, what? 53 times 4 is 212, I think. Yep. 212. So right out the gate, average 212. So I guess maybe it's I guess I'm not factoring in the fact that within those 100 years, those kids would have had kids, and then those kids would have had kids, and they probably had like common great-great-grandparents, and honestly, there's a lot of like propagation. It's also like not starting with a small pool, right? Like, we're starting with literally like 12 kids that then becomes 53 grandkids back in like 1500 BC. It's gonna be a lot of them. But then you have David. And so from this point, there's probably like thousands at this point. Obviously, like whole nations, right? That's like the point of like Jacob or Israel. Yeah, that's Genesis and then all those other books. But David, King David, this one's important because they truly believe that the Messiah is going to be from the Davidic line. And so how rare is that? How rare would it be to say that you were descended from the Davidic line? I think that's what it means. Yeah, because like it's always like, it's gonna be the Messiah is gonna be the offspring of David. It's gonna be in relation to that. And like I said, we can't even confirm that Jesus freaking Christ was related to David. I mean, sure, there's tons of inbreeding on Mary's side, but it's not like Joseph got her pregnant. Right, homies? Yeah. But anyway, David has 20 kids. All right, he has 20 kids. And of these kids, Absalom, who took out Amnon later after he raped his sister, which Tamar and Amnon had 0 kids. Absalom had 4 kids. There's not really any information on the other, 17 kids, 16 kids, how many kids they have. So I just left question marks because you can't just completely, but we could probably average that they had 4, and so that's 80 right out the gate, which Solomon has had 4. He had his son Rehoboam, and then he had his 2 daughters that I can't remember the name. And then despite the best efforts of the Israel-trained Zionist AI Google buddy or whatever, it does not like revealing the fact that Menelik I of Ethiopia was the product of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And then Menelik led the Solomonic dynasty through Ethiopia. To me, that's a beautiful story of having that part of the Davidic line returned to the original people, pre-Abraham, because even at Abraham, there's 20 different people who breeded to get to Abraham from Adam or whoever was Abraham's descendant? I don't know. Maybe I'm rusty on Genesis. But anyhow, Solomon had 4 kids that we know of, but he also had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Sure, the wives were mostly political assets. Who cares? Did they lead into idolatry and sorcery? Yes, of course. It's an easy thing to have happen with hot native women. Or I guess indigenous, or what would they have been? Foreign. Yeah. That's the word, yeah. What else is to be expected by getting with hot foreign women? You know, Solomon's only man. Right? Solomon's only man. However, his son Rehoboam had 88 kids. And so keep in mind, again, that is like 1000 BC. So if like Confucius has like 2 million kids, these people are probably in like the multi-million. I guess it's like decently rare if you're like actually like, because like the like breeding mechanics of humans is like a really weird exponential formula that's so hard to track. Like I'm sure that if I like had somebody who was better with computers than me, I could have them, do a full chain of average and then get there, and then you have the points of Jewish history where they're exiled or moved or tossed about one which way, which they then intermix with the people of that land, because what else are you supposed to do? Keep the chain of incest going? I don't know. I'm not saying that the Europeans aren't without their fair share of incest. It just seemed to be, we're in a more enlightened time, I think, is where we're at, or we should be. Oh man, what's the meaning of anything? How can one be Jewish and also atheistic? That doesn't make sense to me. I thought like the point of being a Jew, like religiously, was because there's like, there's the one point which is just the sacred truth. You take all of human events, all of history, everything that's ever happened, and you just run it back, and you arrive at that one specific, infinitesimally small point that's just there. That's the highest principle. That's the one. That's the God. That's just there. It just exists. Go look up Baruch Spinoza. Baruch Spinoza. He was a Jewish philosopher that got exiled, or I think he got exiled. He got exiled or excommunicated by the rest of the Jews, which is great. If that's what you're going for, I don't know. But yeah, you got that one exact point. This stuff can be is kind of more meant to be debated. Like that's the point of debate, is like, and like reading through the Old Testament, you really get to a point where this kind of is more eloquent or relative to the God of the mind, the one, where this is more kind of like reflection. So like if here's a little Gnostic in metaphysics for you, is that one point that is God, that just started expanding. Well, that outside part, that's just ever present. That's called the macrocosm. And then you have the cosmic, which is just the entire cosmos. And then you have the microcosmic, which is the inward workings of the human soul and all of that kind of stuff. And so this is the macro-micro God, and this is the cosmic God. Or actually, I think it's more based on like, the sun exhibits a lot of electromagnetism and gravity, and then the Earth also does, and then human beings also do, and Jupiter does, and Saturn does, and all these planets do, and eventually it just kind of like coalesces. There's an ever-present cosmic microwave background. How is that for a mechanism from whence this thing can just move and operate freely? How is this or this not that personal God? This is like more getting in touch with the internal soul. This is more the external, what you do. When King David is mentioning the Holy One, he's talking about this guy, which is just, he's created everything. He doesn't really take a huge active part in life or people. I really see him more as like a computer programmer. Like, why else do you think we're discovering so many just like randomly really cool stuff out in space, Basically created humanity or whatever governing system that can make that, and then is just going around creating cool things. At least that's what I would do if I were like, a god that could like program program things within space. That's exactly what I would do. This guy's more created and is just the birth between, that energy and the Earth's energy. And so these two are the things. This is like the culmination of King David's God. But what, like, we're talking like multi-million, people directly descended from Israel, which is cool in and of itself. I'm not going to knock that. What I am going to knock is people thinking that just because you can even track, a common ancestor back 3,000 years, that you're entitled to control everything, that you're entitled to kill and maim children, rape soldiers, do a little weird chicken ritual where you spin a chicken around your head and then sacrifice it. I don't know, you guys seem to be, you guys take the name Israel without realizing that Israel literally means struggles with God. And I have never seen or heard of another group of people that have struggled with God more than the Israel people and the Zionists. Christian Ziony, it's a freaking oxymoron, How in any scope of the imagination are Christians allied with Jews? Like, on a religious level. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you picked Christianity because you felt like you were told that this was your Messiah and that you should take that, and then most people have adopted that as the one true God, which is a whole horrible issue. And then you have the other ones that just say, no, that dude wasn't it. This other one is supposed to show up closer to like 2000 AD, and he's supposed to be more kingly, more royal or whatever. Which, here's the thing about Jesus, I said it earlier, is that he is just an innocent soul, right? He was just an innocent soul. That's the one that he was foretold as, Him coming out and saying, hey, I'm the Son of Man, that's... Who isn't, right? Who isn't? Who isn't the Son of Man? We're all Son of Man. The Father and I are one? Yeah. How else do you think it works? The Father and I are one. Because I recognize the mind's eye, the third eye, that one right there that's located in the pineal gland that activates. And gosh, man, everything sucks nowadays. Why is there like so much violence and hatred? It's ridiculous. I'm freaking over it. It's like, I wasn't even like, I didn't have any sort of like it's not anti, it's Jew-phobic. I'm sorry. If we're going to tolerate the term Islamophobic to put down a religion, then it's not anti-Semitism. That is for Semitic people. That is people of the Levant, ethnically, i.e. Palestine, general Arabs down into kind of like Iraqi and, Sumerian territory. And then technically, I think pretty much all of the Kemetic people too are, at least the northern parts are, they come from a Semitic speaking region. But I think it's mostly like just ancient Arabs are Semitic. No, it's Jew-phobic. It's got to be, that's the term. And I don't like feeling like people could think that I'm Jew-phobic, because I'm not. It's actually, the more I've read the Old Testament, the more I do see where like religious Jews who believe in God, as they should, atheistic Jews I don't understand it. But the God that you're supposed to debate and ask questions of and poke at with logic and reason. You know, I absolutely respect your guys' specific take, I guess. I can understand why some of you guys, or why you guys wouldn't take Jesus Christ as the Messiah. I have my own views on it personally. You guys are, well, actually, your guys' thing is coming up. It's got to be even soon. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, they just say that it's like 2200. It's the 6000th Hebrew year or whatever. Is their Messiah is supposed to show up. And it's supposed to usher in world peace. Well, what if it's like just the person that has been here already, and it's just at that time that it's acknowledged? You know, I really don't know. But I don't want to like feel like I'm hating people except for Zionists. I despise Zionists. I think that there's a certain necessary component to there has always been a wickedness attached to the name Israel. It's happened. I don't know what you guys want me to say, you know. Like Jacob literally like used lies and deception to steal the birthright while Abraham was dying while freaking Esau was off hunting. The whole premise of like Jacob is built on like deceit and like lies, right? I don't know. I don't want to get into it right now. There's a lot of Jews, and I think that's all right. You know, I'm not gonna say I try to not be, you know, all Jews are Zionists or all Jews are Israel sympathizers. I think a lot of them are. I think a lot of the cooler ones, like Jack Black, need to wake up and recognize that this is the same crap that that poser loser from Germany in the 1940s was doing, and that absolutely no one should be for it, you know, religion or otherwise. And I leave this with you and just to aim to look for the sacred truth in this world, to pursue good and just try to be a good person and help out your neighbors and just stuff like that. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.